Religious communities are an integral part of solving most of the global challenges that we face today. They are voices of moral authority within their communities. They call us to respond ethically to the challenges of our time, but they also possess enormous capacities to bring to bear on these challenges themselves. Faith-based organizations are highly professionalized in many cases. They have resources and experience, and we absolutely need to have them involved in working on all of these issues. When it comes to, for example, natural disasters, faith-based communities have often been in local sites around the world long before a disaster happens. They are always on the front lines of providing relief in the face of those disasters, and they are the ones who will be around long after the disaster ends and long after the international donor community moves on to whatever disaster we're facing next. So from the point of view of resilience, from the point of view of sustainability, religious communities and religious actors are vital parts of the solution. I think policymakers need to do a better job of listening to and hearing religious leaders. And this is a two-way street in the sense that policymakers need to better understand where religious communities are coming from. The fact that the language and the framing that they use to discuss certain issues is maybe different from the way that those issues are discussed in the policy world. And at the same time, I think religious leaders and religious communities also need to realize that policymakers, by nature of the work that they do, see the world in a certain way, and they need to be able to connect the wisdom and the experience that religious communities have to very specific, often very technical processes that are being used to solve these problems. So that conversation isn't always easy. It needs the work of a lot of the kinds of people that we have here at the IF20. Many of them play a very important bridging role, a translational role, if you will, insofar as they're people who have one foot in the world of religion and one foot in the world of global policymaking. And I think some of the figures that play a leadership role here, the IF20, are uniquely placed to help that crucial translation step to take place successfully. I'm hearing a lot about issues relating to the environment, climate, and sustainability. And that's appropriate because it's the defining crisis of our time. And I think it's clear by now that in every single major world tradition, religious tradition around the world, there's a well-developed conversation, a movement often focused on the need to protect the natural environment based on theological precepts or religious beliefs. There's also now, I think, very vibrant interfaith spaces where those conversations are happening. What I'm hoping to see develop out of this is greater connectivity between faith-based advocacy to protect the environment and the, by now, already well-developed, let me call it, secular side of that, right? I feel that sometimes there's a faith-based conversation about this that's happening in one track and a more secular climate change combat advocacy track happening over here, and the two of them are not connecting with each other. Imagine how much more powerful, how much more impact we could have if faith-based and secular-based advocates for protecting the environment were working hand in hand. To me, leaving no one behind means that we are always considering the position and the plight of those who are most vulnerable, those whose existence is most precarious, those who are often invisible because they're not necessarily well connected to the spaces or the mechanisms through which we solve global problems. And they literally kind of fall between the gaps sometimes. And so solutions to global problems need to be inclusive of those kinds of communities. Indeed, it's almost a moral litmus test for the ethical soundness of the solutions that we devise, that those communities be included and part of the solution. Not simply part of the solution in the sense that they're able to enjoy the benefits of the solution. Obviously that part is crucial, but part of the solution in the sense that their often unique experiences, wisdom, their voices are heard in the way that we define the problem and the way that we devise the solutions to it. That's what leaving no one behind means to me. The IF20 has been happening for 10 years now. Right? This is a 10-year-long experience starting in 2014 where some good folks that are present and who have been leaders at this convening saw the wisdom of connecting interfaith conversations to the G20, realized that the G20 was emerging as this really unique space that was something other than other multilateral mechanisms and platforms like the United Nations that everyone knows about, was something more than the G7, which everyone thought of as, those are the most important, mostly Western rich countries in the world. This is a G20 format, which recognizes that the world is changing, that recognizes that the configuration of countries that are in a position to shape policy solutions is changing. And that if you want to have a conversation that is about the changing rules of how we govern the world, a set of rules that must by design no longer reflect a limited set of cultural, social, and inevitably religious experiences, that you're going to need to widen the table in terms of the voices that are involved. Now, once you have a wider range of voices, yes, it makes the conversation more complicated at one level. But what I hear a lot here at the IF20 is a lot of conversation about the ways in which people of faith, regardless of what their faith tradition happens to be, can find common platforms, consensus positions around some of the most important issues of the day. And so what I would love to see, and what I think will really pique the interest of policymakers, open their eyes a bit, maybe cause them to rethink certain misconceptions they have about religion, which they often see as simply divisive force. People of different religions can never get together. If they can be presented with a common consensus position on, for example, the challenges associated with the rise of artificial intelligence, representing significant voices from all of the world's major faith traditions, it's going to be very difficult for them to ignore as they think about how to address these challenges at the level of policy.